The journey of writing this class began several years ago when I came to know a shaman one cool equinox evening at sunset. Because I appreciated his sharing of medicine as he led a group in a healing teepee gathering, leading the way intuitively, I started to see openings in my life for further healing. Here is the story of that experience. The people who initially gathered for the event were quiet and gentle as we walked toward the woods in the later parts of ebbing dusk. Some were holding hands, some talking softly. We moved down a wide wooded pathway, dimly illuminated by white Christmas lights strung along the perimeter to guide us to the teepee. When we rounded the bend, there stood a large wooden deck flanked on either side by lit tiki torches, and atop the deck stood the large teepee. We were invited to climb up into the teepee and make ourselves comfortable, each choosing the chair to sit on around the outer perimeter of the teepee. Each seat had cushions, and our host offered blankets to make it a comfortable space. The interior of the teepee was decorated with a large totem pole near the back and a small table along the right side of the seating area which contained several lit candles. In the center of the teepee, the owner of the property started the soft low flames of a fire in the fire pit, and the streaming smoke was drawn through the top flap of the ensemble. Since the shaman had not yet arrived, we sat for a bit, cuddled under our blankets, in relative anonymity. We were only sort of able to make each other out caught in the shadows and lapping lights of the fire. It was a stunning feeling to realize I was so far from home, in the woods in the dark with only the company of one fellow student amidst a group of strangers, yet I was not afraid. The owner of the property began by telling us about her work with equine therapy, explaining the intuitive relationship between people and horses and how beneficial it is to some people. She also explained that she never fathomed eventually having a teepee or doing that sort of intuitive equine therapy work with clients while she was studying counseling. She explained she felt everything happened in its own time for the right reasons. I too was a counseling student and eager to hear these stories of the possibility of beautifully poetic resolutions to these pursuits of the righteous and most advantageous path. Gently our host then asked us to informally introduce ourselves in our own time and our own ways. One by one, very gradually, people started to share who they were and why they were there. Between each introduction there were delicate pauses during which everyone sort of settled back in waiting with patient anticipation for the next person to feel moved to speak. Although we all came there for diverse reasons, the most striking introduction was from a Native American man who was an elder in his tribe. He admitted he came because he was in the twilight of his years and had been diagnosed with cancer years prior. He was transitioning from traditional medicine and had decided to focus on spirit-based work using sweat lodges, something he hosted for people for many years, as his path toward a final passage. It sounded like tears choked his words as he alluded that perhaps his prognosis was not so good and that this was anticipated to be a dying journey. Beside him sat one of his students, and he admitted that though she was a young girl she was the one who fulfilled his dream of coming to a site deemed as an energy vortex. She persuaded him to come to the event by surprising him. There was also a musician among us holding a long traditional indigenous wooden flute that he played periodically during the experience. It was so mesmerizing and soothing to be there amidst that soft group of people in a warm, cozy environment. As we waited, the owner of the property encouraged the flute player to play music for us and we were further lulled by the beautifully poetic songs he played. When he stopped playing, we heard these tremendous howling and growling noises off in the dense greenery around the property's path. The owner told us it was a pack of coyotes coming very close to the teepee, likely roused by the flute song. Some of us were afraid of them, including me, but the owner assured us that it was okay and that her dog would watch out for us. Finally, the shaman arrived and introduced himself, and he took a very long time to settle in and prepare to begin. He went on to explain that he was trained by the Michael Hahn Foundation for Shamanic Studies. He also shared that he worked as a licensed professional counselor. This seemed to illuminate that counselors have the choice to pick unique things to offer to the people who come to them in the pursuit of health. He also further explained the history of the land around that region and how some believed that land to be the location of a powerful energy vortex. Then he explained shamanism and described how indigenous healers communicated with the ancestors for healing purposes when performing intentioned healing rituals and ceremonies. He explained how shamans believe that our ancestors are in all things, in the animals, the land, the trees and the earth that surround us. These ancestors are living things that convey medicine through their simultaneous lived experience and through symbolic messages from which we can learn. For example, witnessing a deer may symbolize to the shaman an incoming message of compassion and peace to the person it appeared. He also explained how the practice of shamanism is all about not only being aware of one's surroundings, but also about looking inward and finding that connection to the place of the ancestors and higher spiritual planes through meditation, drumming, and connectedness of the people participating. It is all about setting intention and then engaging in the lived experience thereafter, trusting that all will come to pass in the ways it was intended. He explained there is an element of unity in all things and that if we choose to tap into that connectivity and awareness, we are all capable of being shamans. I felt honored by that sense of truth bestowed. After that, a lot of the evening was sort of a blur as we were encouraged to shift our awareness inward to capture our thoughts, images and feelings. He said that autumn is a good time of year to shed the things that we no longer need. He said that during the experience we could either drum along with the music or sit quietly while connecting with the things that we are ready to let go of. We were encouraged to seek the support of our spirit animal or our ancestors to help us to find the thing that we need to purge. While we did this, he also welcomed us to drum together. I felt timid at first to drum, kind of feeling tentative about how hard to hit it or whether to stay in time with everyone or divert to my own beat. It took a while to get over the nervousness of thinking someone might watch or judge, but then I decided to simply drum and it helped to turn my awareness within. I realized I would like to let go of having anxiety-driven chest pains all the time. At that moment of internal clarity, my grandpa came to mind, and I lived within a memory moment with him that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I realized that for much of his life he suffered from chest pains and anxiety. It seemed like his memory came to my mind's eye for that reason. Our drumming gradually slowed down uniformly and then intuitively we all stopped. Sitting in silence for a bit, the shaman explained the premise of the shamanistic experience. He said that it is important to know that it is the belief that this type of work goes beyond just healing ourselves. Shamans also believe that we heal the old wounds of the past as well. In fact, he said that if we can release an affliction, we are likely releasing an affliction that affected 7 generations before us and could potentially extend to 7 generations after us if not reconciled. He said that shamans also believe that we as carnal beings are 10 times more capable of creating change on this plane than the ancestors in the ethers. In working to perform this type of release, we not only honor and help our own personal lineage of ancestors to come to greater peace, but we also break a cycle that stemmed in the past and might extend into the future. It felt like very powerful work. During the next introspective drumming session, I had a truly meaningful experience communicating with my grandpa. He came to me so vividly that I could feel him hugging me and sense his cheeks double against my face just as I had as a child. I also sensed that he wanted me to know that nearly all his anxiety stemmed from wanting to work to support his large family while pushing to have something extra to leave behind for his loved ones. I sincerely sat in that teepee and wept over these messages he shared because around that time I was in the later aftermath of a divorce and I have been getting help financially from my grandma. I often felt ashamed of my ill capacity to fend for myself. During all the times I've sought help, I always attributed the generosity solely to her. He seemed to want me to know that he intended to perform the extra work while he was alive in case anyone in the family faltered. Though I had been feeling bad about myself over facing financial instability well into my 30s, I realized then that this self-criticism also ironically came from a philosophy my grandpa held during his living years. I also realized that he was simultaneously rescinding the harsh message that he delivered during a time of frustration and kept me bound for much of my life. He once stated during his living years that if someone did not find their way successfully into becoming a fully functioning and contributing adult by their 30s, they didn't deserve additional help. During that spiritual experience, I felt my grandpa seemed to want me to know that he worked so hard because he didn't want anyone to suffer the wrath of a heartless financial world alone. I also felt that he was expressing that he was proud of me and acknowledging that of all the people he could help, he wanted me to feel proud of accepting the help he left behind to ease what he knew was a difficult life journey. I realized that presence was still enveloping the family, allowing us a little more time to truly find our own ways. I sort of lost myself to emotions, and the teepee fire and the connection and peacefulness of the moment swept over me. I wept silently, nearly sobbing outright over this encounter, and yet oddly, despite the low firelight shrouding us to an extent, I did not want anyone to see me mopping my cheeks with my sleeves, since I saw that I was one of the few who had an outward emotional response to the experience. It was a powerful release. At various points during the sequence of events, the flute player was encouraged to play the flute again. At that time, the shaman encouraged us to shift from communicating with our ancestors to prepare to let go of the affliction we stated we wanted to release earlier in the night. He assured us this act of letting go would honor our ancestors, ourselves, and those who come after us in our lineage. This time the flute song sounded like a funeral to me, and I cried again in mourning over my grandpa's passing, and yet also felt our continual connection affirmed by the powerful message he bestowed. The shaman encouraged us to send love to our ancestors and to let them know we are going to work to release them from their former pain through this purging work. Then he asked us to thank our ancestor and to encourage them to find the place of the greatest light and joy and to go toward that comforting high resonance of light. It felt I was offering my grandpa some genuine closure, and he shared that he was eternally grateful and proud of me despite what I thought he felt toward me. When the flute session finished, the coyotes again howled, this time louder than before. The shaman again spoke and shared the honoring importance of expressing the truth that is within our hearts. He said if only we could all go back to when we were 4 years old, when we still believed in the sacred arts like magic and mysticism, and a time when the expression of truth was so naturally ingrained. He felt that if we could remember and revert to how it felt to be that young, then we could really bring along some powerful change to humanity. After we each shared what we each experienced thus far in the night, we were asked to stand encircling the fire. The shaman encouraged us to put our left arm on the shoulder of the person to our left and our right arm behind the back of the person to our right. We were told to take our time to prepare ourselves to let go of all the things that we were ready to get rid of. By placing the energy into the fire in whatever ways seemed most intuitive, we all swayed slightly in our ring while the shaman shook his rattle, which sounded a lot like a snake. During that time, linked and together around the fire, we were steeped in contemplation, readying and intermittently purging ourselves. I released the pain in my chest by unfolding my arms and letting go of the pain, gently placing it in the fire. Some gestured as if they were dropping their burdens into the fire, others breathed, spit or blew what they no longer needed into the fire. It seemed as we stood there the fire started to dwindle, as if to signify we had all expelled what we needed to. Then the shaman again encouraged us to take our seats, and he spoke to us about how animals are all around us offering us messages of meaning. He referred to the coyotes who were howling and chattering through the night, and how though they do not like people, because we are overpopulating the planet, their presence and song contained a meaningful message for us. He said that coyotes sometimes represent the yin and yang, reminding us that when something good happens there is always a bad that comes with it, and vice versa. He said that, for example, when we win the lottery, then we often have harassment from others in the form of begging, soliciting or harassing to gain access to that money. Likewise, an injury or illness can bring about a restful period or a time of internalizing and contemplating that could be very healing. He then pulled a coyote pelt mask out of his bag and asked us to spend time with the mask each individually. As it was passed around the circle, we had the chance to hold it, wear it, or engage with it in the ways that seemed most suitable, while thinking about what the yin-yang message or any other messages that the coyote might have for us as individuals. He said this act of internalizing or embodying the messages of another creature was called shape-shifting. Again, he asked the flute player to play a song on the flute while the mask was passed around. This time the song, soaring and sweet, reminding me of the howling of the coyotes we'd heard earlier. Some people blew hard into the fire when they got the mask, some sat with it for a long time, and some wore it. When it came to be my turn, I felt the soft fur and caught a glint of the firelight in the eye of the mask. I realized that for a long time I did not believe in yin-yang and thought that I could have all good things and never see the other side. Sitting with the coyote skin, I started to see how yin-yang unfolded and presented itself in my life. I saw that I once knew many people and lived a life of chaos, managing a record label and orchestrated tours and festivals, and how conversely as I age I only maintain a few close and dear connections. I also realized that I was once young and vital, and how now the pains and decline of meeting old age are revealing themselves bit by bit. Many yin-yang revelations occurred to me at that time. When I wore the skin as a mask, I realized that I was once like a coyote, struggling with my own sense of being alive and making meaning for myself in what appeared to be an overcrowded world. I recalled how during one of those moments of deep self-judgment and tumult I wandered deep into the woods and howled and sobbed as loud as the coyotes howling in the dark. I realized also later that part of the yin-yang exchange for having experienced a very spiritually infused evening at the teepee gathering meant having to face a long drive home in the dark night. I also realized that I was very afraid to face the pack of coyotes on the way back to the car. Suddenly though, still donning the mask, my fear of the coyotes subsided when I realized that I share the planet with others such as these little coyotes. I sensed the truth of nature's balance and how if they chose to attack and kill me it would be the rightful thing per the greater laws of nature. It struck me that perhaps it might even be considered a good way to die. Especially, since I was part of the human overpopulation that infringed on their ability to live wild and free and to raise their families while living out their lives in peace. It was very humbling. When everyone had a chance to interact with the mask, we gathered again standing in a circle near the fire holding hands. The shaman said that we should allow a sense of gratitude, appreciation and love for all things to rise in each of us. Then, when it felt like that love was overflowing in us, we were asked to send that gratitude and love into the group. I saw people smile, felt hands squeezed tighter, and I myself emitted a general sense of gratitude and well-being toward the group. It was so touching. Also, during the closing moments, the elder Native American among us spoke, and he said that it was very meaningful indeed for his apprentice to have brought him to the energy vortex and that he appreciated the work of the shaman. He also shared some tobacco from his ancestors, and he said we should take the tobacco in our left hand as another sacred act of release. As we threw the tobacco into the fire, we were encouraged to again throw the affliction that we were resolving into the fire with it and say, "I release you," and to again thank our ancestors. The Native American elder also said that like the rattlesnake sheds its skin during that time of year, a circle too must be shed. Therefore, he shared a way of breaking a circle he knew to be meaningful. He said everyone joins the circle and one person starts the unraveling by turning to the person on their left and saying, "Thank you for being here," in whatever way seems fitting, and then the second person responds to that first person. The first person then moves to the next person in the circle, and each person does the same one by one until everyone has been acknowledged. When each person reached the end of the ring, they were free to go. This was so precious and just what I needed to find and feel closure. After meeting the shaman that night at the teepee gathering, I sought to spend more time moving along my own soul-searching path. It wasn't the first time I had decided to go on a spiritual sabbatical, so this time around I was wiser when I embarked on the journey. I realized that I needed to assign a very positive intention before embarking upon a new path of self-knowing, so I could assure I was not going to encounter something that I was not wholly ready to experience. I had been studying Native American philosophies for some time before encountering the shaman, and during that time I came across the phrase "the beauty way." It intrigued me because the meaning of beauty was largely obscure and difficult to define. It caused my wheels to spin upstairs, and I started to think about how the sheer depths of obscurity could allow me to take liberties in more deeply defining this phrase for myself over time. I saw it as an opportunity to investigate the meaning as I lived out my life and moved through my unraveling experiences. I felt that the compass point that I was following was unintentionally bereft of sufficient meaning prior to hearing this phrase. Oh, how I craved knowing something so lovely, so vastly intriguing as the beauty way. It seemed utterly fitting for me to go on a quest to define the beauty way for myself, even if countless others before or hereafter will have done so for themselves as well. I treated my curiosity as a sort of invitation to reflect upon what the beauty way means for me personally, as well as an invitation for all of you to come to walk with me as you define for yourself what the beauty way means to you simultaneously. Therefore, as I share what unfolds as beautiful for me, I invite you to also do your own journeying in your own ways and to try the activities that I shared throughout in order to soul search and gain your own understanding of this philosophy.